The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Education Connections webinar, Supporting Newcomer English Learners, Session 1. My name is Joanna Duggan and I will be moderating this afternoon's session. We are delighted to be joined this afternoon by Ann Hengerer. Ann has been conducting teacher professional development on sheltered instruction and ESL methods nationwide for 10 years, with a focus on mainstream teachers' instruction of English learner students. She is also a mentor and coach for student interns at George Washington University's Graduate School of Education and Human Development. Ann previously served as an ESL teacher and ESL resource teacher for over 30 years in Montgomery County, Maryland. Thank you, Ann, for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the webinar.
We'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's been able to join us for our 21st Education Connections webinar. Thanks for joining this afternoon, both to those of you who are already a part of the Education Connections community, as well as those of you who may be new to Education Connections. We're so glad you could all be here. We'll begin today's session with a brief introduction, including an overview of Education Connections. Next, we'll hear from Ann Hengerer about supporting newcomer English learners. She'll first provide some background on newcomer students, then she'll share profiles of newcomer students, guide us through a viewing of a short video called Building Bridges, and finally, provide practical suggestions for how you can support newcomer students in your classrooms through integration of students' native languages. Following her presentation, we'll have some time reserved for questions and comments from participants. We'll be monitoring questions as they come in, and we encourage you to send along any thoughts or questions that come to mind during the presentation using the questions box in the GoToWebinar window. During today's session, we'll also be posting some polling questions related both to your background and today's topic. Once the results are in, we'll post them for you to view. We also invite you to chat further about today's topic by joining us on Twitter. You can use the hashtag EdConnects, EDCONX, to participate in the conversation with Education Connections staff and your fellow educators. For those of you who may be new to Education Connections, we wanted to briefly introduce you to the community and resources available. Education Connections is an initiative of the Center for Applied Linguistics in collaboration with the University of Oregon. It is hosted on the University of Oregon's Ulbaverse platform. Education Connections is a free online community providing access to a wide range of resources and bringing educators together to collaborate around implementing high-quality standards-based instruction with all students and especially English learner students. There are many different ways to participate in Education Connections. You can share ideas and ask questions in the discussion forums, find resources to use in your classroom, participate in live events such as this one, and receive Tuesday's tips and Friday's fun facts that are posted in the forums every week. Anyone is welcome to join, so we invite you to sign up today if you're not already a member. As a reminder, the Education Connections team will post a video archive of the webinar, a PDF of the PowerPoint, and links to resources related to today's webinar. To access these resources, log on to Education Connections and click on the Live Events tab. On your screen, you'll now see a few polling questions regarding your background. We'll post the results as they come in. Okay, the first question asks about your background. Are you a general education teacher, an instructional coach or teacher educator, an ELL, ESOL, or bilingual teacher, an ELL, ESOL, bilingual coordinator or administrator, or have some other role in the school? Okay, we'll give you just a few more seconds here to enter your selections. Great, and it looks like we have a lot of variety here, a lot of ELL and ESOL, both teachers and coordinators, a few general education teachers, some coaches, and a lot of people who also marked other as their role. Okay. Our second question asks, with what grade levels do you primarily work? Pre-K to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12, the full spectrum of pre-K to 12, or college and university? And we'll give you just a few more seconds to enter your selections. Great, and it looks like we have a lot of people who work in the elementary ages with pre-K to 5, and some representation among all of the other levels as well. And our final question just asks where you are joining us from today. What region of the United States do you live and teach in? Or also if you're joining us from outside the United States, please let us know that as well. And we'll give it just a few more seconds for you to enter in your selection. Great. So it looks like we have a lot of our attendees, over 40% are joining us from the Northeast United States today, with some representation as well from the Midwest, the South, a little bit more in the West, and then 5% are from outside the United States. So welcome to everyone from wherever you are joining us. I'm now going to turn it over to Anne.
Yes, welcome everyone to the webinar, Supporting Newcomer English Learners. We're glad to have you here with us. Today I'm going to offer two types of objectives. I'm going to present two types of objectives. There will be content objectives and language objectives. So let's start with the content objectives. At the end of the session, participants will be able to recognize the diversity among newcomer students' backgrounds, understand what newcomer students may experience as they enter U.S. schools, and identify ways to incorporate newcomers' native languages in order to make core content more accessible. And our language objectives, there are three of them as well. At the end of the session, participants will be able to describe in writing their experiences working with newcomer students, discuss various characteristics and diversity among students who are newcomers, and finally list ways to incorporate students' native languages into classroom instruction. I'd like to talk about the background of newcomer students. Much of the Center for Applied Linguistics has done extensive research on newcomers, and you can find this research in a book by Short and Boyson called Helping Newcomer Students Succeed. Short and Boyson did two surveys, the first from 1996 to 2001, at which point they found that there were 115 programs at 196 sites in 29 different states and the District of Columbia. During those years, 14,500 students were served, and 75% of those centers had opened in the 1990s. Their second survey was done from 2008 to 2011, at which time they identified 63 programs and 10,899 students being served. They also identified different types of newcomer students. So in the chart you'll see that there are three types of identified students. The first are the literate students with full schooling. The second are literate students who've had partial schooling. And finally, students with limited or interrupted formal education, known by the acronym of SLIFE students. For each group, we're going to examine their first language literacy, their grade level content knowledge, and their English literacy development compared to other newcomers. Let's look first at the literate students who have had full schooling in their country. This means that they have first language literacy. They also have grade level content knowledge, and their English literacy development will be faster compared to other newcomers, perhaps in your classroom. The second category are the literate students who have partial or possibly interrupted schooling. They too have first language literacy, but they do not have grade level content knowledge, and their English literacy development is average compared to the other newcomers. And finally, the students with limited or interrupted formal education, you will see that they come to your classroom with no first language literacy, no grade level content knowledge, and their English literacy development will be slower at first. The demographics of the newcomer students, these are interesting demographics. You will see that high school sites served 73% of the students. Middle school sites served about 6% of the students. Combined high and middle school sites served about 20%. And 8 of the 63 programs served elementary students. You will see that the newcomers in these programs were from 90 different countries. They spoke more than 55 languages or dialects. The most common languages represented were Spanish, 90%, Arabic, 38%, Mandarin, 19%, French, 17%, Korean and Vietnamese both 14%. Nearly 1/3 of these students qualified as SLIFE students, students with limited or interrupted formal education. The newcomer programs shifted demographically. You will see that originally 76% of the programs were in urban metropolitan areas. But in the latest poll, that had dropped to 52%, while the programs in both suburban and rural areas grew. The suburban areas grew from 17% to 33%, and in the rural areas, the centers grew from 7% to 14%. Many key issues are raised by newcomer programs. One is the issue of family reunification. Another, student experiences with trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. There is the issue of accountability measures. There's also an issue of staffing in English language development and bilingual programs. Furthermore, there's an issue about special education services, high school graduation credits, and finally, post-secondary options for these students. We'd like you to reflect on the newcomers that have been in your room either this year, currently were in your room, or newcomers that you've worked with in the past. What languages, what were their languages? What were their countries of origin? Where were they from? What were their immigration experiences? What about their educational backgrounds? And think about the education of their family members. Please post your response in the questions box within the GoToWebinar window. We can see by the responses coming in that there is a variety of languages, many that weren't even mentioned by us. Turkish, Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese Creole, French Creole. Students from Jordan, Afghanistan, Pompeii, Egypt, and Sudan. Thai students, Vietnamese students. Many of you have taught asylees, refugees, and undocumented immigrants. All right, we are now going to show you a video clip called Building Bridges. And in this video clip, we will see middle school students from St. Luke's Middle School in Manhattan buddied up and given the opportunity to interact with the students from Newcomers High School in Long Island City in the borough of Queens. As you watch the video, we'd like you to consider the following questions. What insights did the students from St. Luke's Middle School gain from interviewing their newcomer buddies? How did the newcomers feel before being interviewed? How did they feel after they were interviewed? And what did the students learn from their collaboration? You'll be sharing your thoughts in the questions box within the GoToWebinar window. Students from St. Luke's Middle School have traveled to Long Island City in the borough of Queens to Newcomer High School. As people around the country argue about immigration, two groups of students come together to try to understand each other on a personal level. I take a trip in the subway. We come out, that means about campus. It's very industrial, it's very loud, it's very noisy. It's very exciting. It's also very real. Newcomer High School is a school for new immigrants, and our students generally haven't been in any school in the United States before. So all of our students are English language learners. They come from over 50 different countries. Over 50 different languages. As I grew up, I started to experience discrimination against girls from boys. For instance, I wasn't allowed to go outside alone. I had to stay home and do housework. 3 years ago, when I was 15, my family had to immigrate here because we improved our economic situation as inclusion. Learning a new language and adapting to the family culture, my father's son with cancer is complicated. He was going through that.
My sister and I were born in a small family. The wage of my father in a month in U.S. is equal to the size of our family in the whole year in China.
Since Julie Mann and Kim Allen met 12 years ago at a basic history teacher training, students from Newcomers and St. Luke's have collaborated annually on projects that center on human rights. We started matching students, and every year it starts with letter writing. So my students write letters about themselves, and we start writing back and forth. Today, the buddies are meeting face-to-face for the first time. In this year's project, called Building Bridges, Newcomer students will share their personal immigration stories, and the St. Luke students will interview them about their lives and turn their findings into research. We include our stories as immigrants, what difficulties we have faced, what difficulties we had to pass through when we first came here, and what's our condition now. Well, it's kind of
It was full of excitement, and I think our life is going to be almost better than before. Just we had more opportunities together than maybe in the past.
It's hard to adapt to America.
Yeah. Because it's not the same book, not the same language, it's not the same like friends and school, because it was like a new life again. So no shame. Not really, but I understand my story, you know. How I came in, right? So we came in the Civil War, when after the Civil War, my father was anytime I think of that, makes me hate, right? So what is my father? My father's name is Owen. He's an American kid. I said to my daddy, I actually lived in one, like, I love this family. Which reminds me I can use it very good service teaching. But people, what is? That's what it was. One is the partnership that people can see that the people can be very good for something.
Julie students, like the larger immigrant population, are struggling with the perception that their presence in this country is a threat and that their differences make them dangerous. It's important that people get to know that the immigrants are not the people that we're not here to take away things from Americans, that we're here to help, to work, to get a better future, a better life. Everybody, and it's Fernando and Jonathan. We're really great. I learned that Jonathan wants to be an electrician, which I didn't expect. And found out that Fernando wants to be a mechanic, which is really cool. So got to know a little bit about what their goals are. They want to have jobs. They want to be responsible people. I think for the students that came in, who have had little experience with new immigrants in the United States, they might have one idea of who they are. And they can read about it and they can learn about immigration, but unless they become friends, intimate friends with a person who's an immigrant, and really understand what that struggle is about, it's hard for them to know what that means. And so the further back him and I can step, the more real that relationship is going to be. I didn't know there was a war in Congo, and their life seems so difficult, and they just wanted to come here for a better life. I didn't have to deal with that, so it was really interesting to get to know the immigration story. It's really difficult as it is to get here. That's why it is that we need harder times, not at the beginning. None of my friends wanted to tell this story because that is something personal. They're actually trying to know about you and your past and your feelings. You feel like you're one of the kids today was crying during one of her interviews because many of the issues that the immigrant students are dealing with are very, very upsetting. But I think that there are issues that we have to talk about, and I don't think that teenagers are afraid to talk about it as adults are. I think that we just have to give them the opportunity to. Over the next few months, students will continue to talk to their friends through letters and in person, and the immigration essays they collaborated on will be collected into a book.
Thanks for everybody. The first smart guy, oh my God, the very smart guy. It's only one mistake. Thank you, my friend.
This is the hope that maybe someday there will be like racial crime. Now I feel like I really can make a change at the start, at the beginning. No matter where you come from, what was your obstacles, what was your social standards, what was your family conditions, you make your own identity. You prove the world who you are.
Okay, now we're going to share some of the newcomer student profiles. Some of these students you actually saw in the video. So let's meet them closer up.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague.
The first student we're going to meet is Melissa Calais. Please, I will read it and please follow along as I introduce her. My name is Melissa Calais. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Colombia, and I came to this country 4 years ago. I go to Newcomer's High School, and this is my last year. I found that many people in this country have lived through almost the same experiences as me. Some of them don't have the same luck I have, because I've had everything I need and more. The big change in my life started when I was doing really badly at school in Columbia, not only with my grades, but with my behavior. My mom thought it would be much better if I came here for a while and tried to figure things out for myself by thinking about what I did before and what I really wanted for my life. I actually can't imagine a future without playing sports. I have a lot of dreams and goals that I would like to come true. If I have a choice, I would love to stay here in New York. This is Guy Kalenga. He is the boy from the Congo that you met in the video. My name is Guy Kalenga. I am 18 years old, and I am in 12th grade. I am from the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa. I have been living in the United States for almost 4 years. My father was a victim of the Civil War. My father was killed because the people who were working with him thought he was giving secret information to the police, to the rebel party, since he was the same ethnic group as them. This happened during the War of 1997. I found out that I was coming to the U.S. 2 days before we traveled. We came in the United States because my mother was here. My life here in the U.S. was unhappy during the first days because it was a huge transition. Finding a new school and making new friends was really hard because no one spoke my language and no one could understand me. Now my life has changed a lot. I have many new friends from all over the world. In 20 years, I see myself in a high position, working hard to maintain peace in the world. Our next profile is Fernando Gusnay. My name is Fernando Gusnay. I'm 18 years old. I am in 11th grade. I am from Ecuador, and I have been in the USA for 2 years. I came here without papers. I've had a lot of difficult experience because it is very hard to move to this country and live in this country. I had to suffer a lot because I had to cross the border. To cross the border, you need to be strong and have faith in God. When I arrived in this country, I thought that everything was nice. But when the winter started, it was so ugly because it was a lot colder, and I'm still here. I realized that behind the beauty, this country is hiding the dark side. Some of my hopes are now to graduate from high school, then go to college, and in 20 years, I want to be an electrician. I want to go back to my native country, Ecuador, and work in my country with my family. It is the most important country to me, for it is where I was born and grew up. Our final profile is Tashi Lamo. You saw her in the video as well. Life is not easy. We have to face many problems in our life, and we should always try to struggle through rather than stay behind. Life wasn't easy for me and my family living in our native country, Tibet, but somehow we managed. I was 7 years old when we migrated to Nepal. When I first got to the U.S., I was 15 years old. So here's a student who's lived in Tibet, Nepal, and now the United States. Even though we learned the English language in Nepal, I found it difficult to speak English in New York City because people here speak so fluently. I think I'm getting better at it now. I found the American culture is totally different from my Tibetan culture, but I like the American culture as well. People over here don't hesitate to say what is on their mind. Ultimately, I want to be a doctor, and I know that I can make it if I put a little more effort towards my studies. Thank you, America. With much love and respect, Tashi Lamo, Tibet. Now that you've seen the video and you have had a chance to share the newcomer profiles, we'd like you to reflect about what you think you might try to do differently in your classroom having reviewed these stories. Please post your response in the questions box within the GoToWebinar. I'd like to single out one thing that's been written. I loved the video and showed how it increased awareness of shattered perceptions through meaningful interaction and through the exchange of stories. Another person has suggested they are thinking of having their young students share their culture with their classmates. I would like my students to tell more about their stories. I will be working on getting students to share their stories with each other. Another person stated they would like to have their students do more work interviewing each other about their lives. Another person said, well, not in the classroom. I see how teachers' perceptions must also be addressed. Teachers must get to know their students and their stories. One person did do interviews. The students I worked with this year were in grade 7. We did interviews with each other using bilingual volunteers and Google Translate. I think that this is needed to be expanded to other students in the grade level. We'd now like to share with you the advantages of providing native language supports in your classroom. Research tells us that when working with newcomers, incorporating native language supports will have a key impact, especially by providing better access to core content for students as they learn English. So native supports for newcomers. When working with newcomers, incorporating native language supports can have a key impact. Involving newcomers' native languages conveys the message that they are valued, valid, and welcome. Utilizing newcomers' native languages can provide better access to core content as they learn English. And finally research shows us that strong native language and literacy skills will transfer to the second language and promote faster second language learning. Freeman and Freeman have identified 10 ways that we in the classroom or in a support role in a school can draw on students' first languages. The first is to pair a newcomer with a partner who speaks the same primary language. Second, to host read-alouds in their primary languages. Third, allow English learners to talk in their primary languages. 4, to build a classroom library in students' primary languages. In addition, organize bilingual tutoring. Give students pen pals, just as they did in the video Building Bridges that we saw. Encourage primary language journal writing. Publish books written in the students' primary languages. Use primary language storytellers. And finally, ensure that the classroom environmental print represents the students' primary languages. So, native language support. What is it and why is it important? It's important because native language support is the use of the student's first language to support sheltered content and ESL instruction. Why is it important? It makes instruction in English as comprehensible as possible for the English learner students. It enables them to learn academic content and acquire more English. And these results are published by Wright. Native language support is easiest to provide when teachers who do not speak the native languages effectively incorporate the student's L1 into the classroom. And this research is cited in Ryan. Teachers of English learners can create learning experiences that promote and utilize native language scaffolding among students. This research is also cited in Ryan. And finally, a teacher or paraprofessional speaks the L1, in other words, the native language of the students, also from Ryan. Native language support can be effective and ineffective. So I'd like to point out that native language support is ineffective when it inhibits, but effective when it supports students' effort to obtain comprehensible input from oral or written English. Ineffective methods might include a concurrent translation where the student has no need to attend to the English, or substituting written English text with oral L1 translation where there is no correspondence between the text and the spoken language. But there are many different ways to provide effective supports. Let's go through them together and see. I'd like you, as we go through them together, I'd like you to think about what you are already doing in your classrooms and what you might do more of. First, accept students' contribution in the native language during class discussion. Acknowledge and value that contribution. Model back in English what the student said. Display native language in the classroom. Label the classroom in English and the students' L1s, first languages. Students and or their parents can help make the label. Use a bilingual dictionary or an online translation tool, but always ask a native speaker to check before posting. I think all of us have gotten caught in a bilingual translation that might not be quite accurate. Provide native language and dual language books for at-home reading. Create a classroom lending library. Work with the librarian to leverage bilingual library resources. Send letters home in the student's native language, describing what students are learning in class. Suggest ways that parents can help. Report other classroom news. Often letters can have the native language on one side and English on the back. Some teacher guides have pre-written letters in several languages. We can also provide native language support to support writing in English. I think we've all found that pre-writing activities for our students may be easier for them to do in their first languages. We can help the English learners figure out what to write about. We can help them organize their thoughts using graphic organizers, outlines, or other learning scaffolds, and allow the students to use their L1 in their initial drafts. Students, a wonderful way to help our English learners is have other students help them. Proficient bilingual students provide an excellent source of native language support. Assign a newcomer a buddy. Assign a buddy to a newcomer as they come into their school. This buddy can help them orient to the classroom and school routines. But please watch carefully that the newcomer English learners do not rely on their bilingual buddies to the extent that the buddies are always translating for them all day long. Seek bilingual parent or community volunteers. They can provide occasional assistance in the classroom. If we as teachers or administrators plan ahead, we can maximize the volunteers' time. We can give them a pre-written list of questions or concerns to go over with the students. And we can have them work with the students that have been struggling to understand. This will maximize their time with us. And it is important for us to establish a system for the volunteers to report back to us about their findings and what they discovered. Here's an example of a bilingual glossary or dictionary. And It fulfills all the rules of learning vocabulary. You have the word in the left-hand column, the English word. As you notice in the next column, the definition is in student-friendly terms. Not a dictionary definition, but a student-friendly definition. An example of usage is given, a visual is provided, and a native language translation is also provided. Now it's time to decide whether or not we have met today's objectives. As I read through them, think to yourselves, let's look at the content language first. Our content objectives said, at the end of the session, participants will be able to recognize the diversity among newcomer students' backgrounds, understand what newcomer students may experience as they enter U.S. schools, and identify ways to incorporate newcomers' native languages in order to make core content more accessible. Let's look now at our language objectives and see if we've done what we said we were going to do. At the end of the session, participants will be able to describe in writing their experiences working with newcomer students, discuss various characteristics and diversity among the students who are newcomers, and list ways to incorporate students' native languages into the classroom. Okay, we've saved some time at the end for you to submit questions that you might have in the questions box within the GoToWebinar window, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can in the time that remains. One person said that they particularly appreciated the concrete suggestions for how to incorporate the L1 in more ways. One of you had a question about the time you would suggest that a buddy translate. And of course, this is a fine line to walk. Our goal is to make our students independent learners, but of course, many of them will need the scaffold of a translating buddy as they enter. And I think we can gradually sense when it is time to pull back. Here's an interesting question. As an EL teacher, what kind of work should I have the classroom teacher do in the content area when they are newcomers? This is, of course, something that all newcomers face. They will ultimately be responsible for the curriculum that is being taught. But initially, they can be part of the classroom. They can be given scaffolds. They should never be excluded, because the message we send if we don't call on them or if we exclude them is that they don't matter, that what they have to say is not important. Let's see, on your website, is it possible to refer back to the slideshow that you have used? I'm also unable to attend the second one. Can I watch it later on? Joanna, would you mind answering that?
Sure. So yes, we will post a PDF of the PowerPoint, and we will also post the recording of the webinar, so you can also listen to Anne presenting the slides. So we will post both of those things on our website tomorrow, so you can go back and access these later whenever you want to.
Yes, and I'm reading here, and it's something we're all encountering, looking for secondary level library editions in Arabic, Turkish, Somali, Korean. These are significantly more difficult to find than Spanish books, and that is true. And I think I've been in schools, facilitating in schools where the librarian has taken this as a personal task with the help of the classroom teacher. If we can suggest, if if there is money in the budget and a librarian who's willing to look for these books, based on our suggestions, you know, I really need some books in Somali. I really need some books in Arabic. I think this is a place to start. I like this question. When encouraging students to share their stories, do you have recommendations for how to do this with sensitivity, given that some students may have experienced rather difficult circumstances in their home countries en route to the U.S. and even here as new immigrants? And I think that's an excellent question, and I think we, as the professionals in the room and the counseling support at the school, can be a guidance for us. Very often students do not want to share right away, or they're reluctant to share. And you even saw that in the video where ultimately they loved sharing their stories and were delighted to do so, but they were reluctant to share. So I think we need to be sensitive and not push students who are unwilling to share. But as they watch other students sharing, it's been my experience that very often they will come around and want to share what they have experienced as well. Another possibility is just allowing them to share with you personally, with a teacher or with a counselor or with another student in an effort to be sensitive and not push them so that they are uncomfortable with the assignment. Some of the teachers put students on the computer to learn in their native language. Is this the best solution for non-English speakers? That's an interesting question, because very often when students come in, newcomers come in, they very often don't come in August or September. They're coming in March or April, and we find ourselves, we want to include them. And so the computer is one way to provide native language support, but they should not be put on the computer all day long. They need to be able to participate. And when students, say for example at the elementary level, break into different stations, the computer can be one of the stations that the student visits, but they should be able to follow along with a buddy, just even to watch as the students go from station to station. What scaffolds were in place to facilitate their letter writing? I don't know this exactly, but I do know that there was part of the assignment for both for the middle school students and for the high school students was basically learning to write a letter. So there were lessons taught, obviously, in how to write a good letter, the different parts of letter writing, and this was part of their assignment. In addition, they were then to go on, and the middle school students were to create reports about their buddies, and the high school students were going to be doing journal writing. So I think there must have been very scaffolded assignments teaching the students actually how to write a letter, the different parts of the letter, and then going on and elaborating on the assignment from there. What are some professional organizations that English teachers should join? I'm going to mention some, and I'm also going to turn it over to Joanna because she will have several suggestions. But certainly the TESOL organization, Teachers of English for Speakers of Other Languages, is an excellent organization to join. The resources at the Center for Applied Linguistics are multiple. And Joanna, would you address what some of those resources might be? Because I think they could get tremendous help and support through these.
Sure. So at the Center for Applied Linguistics, we have done a lot of different research and projects for a very long time that all deal with, working with English learners, and we have done some work on supporting newcomer students in particular. So also as part of this Education Connections project, you can find more resources. So at CAL's website, which is just www.cal.org, you can find more information and resources from CAL, and from our Education Connections site as well. You can find additional resources, and there are also forums where you can post specific questions where we, the staff at Cal, can answer you, or as well anyone else who is a part of the forums can share their answers as well. And additionally, besides the, Anne mentioned the TESOL organization as a professional organization you can join. I would also suggest you can look into your regional TESOL organization. So a lot of states have one, or sometimes states will join together and create one for the region. So we have one here in the DC region, and I know a lot of the states have their own TESOL. So that can be a great way to network with other ELL professionals in your area.
And I do believe that Cal will be offering a newcomers workshop. Am I correct?
Yes, we will be hosting our professional development program staff will be offering a Newcomer Institute here in Washington, D.C. on August 8th and 9th. And you can find more information about that on Cal's website, which again is cal.org.
Looking at some of these other questions. I was hoping to obtain some resources for those working with students where Google Translate is not helpful, as with Vietnamese. We have been using Duolingo and picture dictionaries, as well as a few buddies available. Parents are able to support the students in the school. And yes, of course, there are going to be languages where these translation tools and dictionaries that we have available are not available. And the best thing we can do is to look for outside resources. Sometimes through local churches, you can find people who are willing to volunteer, who are more proficient in English and are willing to come into the schools and help the students. I do sympathize because some resources, for example, for Spanish speakers, they are easy to find, or for others, they are not. How do you give L1 literacy support to students whose first language is not a written language, such as Lingala or Guanabu? I don't even know how to pronounce that language. So it's interesting. I myself was a Peace Corps volunteer, and I worked in a country in West Africa where the language was not a written language. And so giving literacy support was done almost entirely orally, through oral storytelling, through oral examples, and they would take those oral stories, and as we taught them, in this case French or English, they would then transcribe those stories into those languages as they learn them. But that's a really good question, because many of the students coming to us do not come with a written language. Let's see. One way for you to communicate with one another, I believe, would be via Twitter. And this could be a terrific resource for you to share what you've used that's worked. I find in webinars like this, the participants have so many good ideas and so many things that they've tried and worked that it would be wonderful if you could tweet some of the things that you've done that would be helpful. Here's another one. I work with newcomers in kindergarten and first grade who have not writing or reading experience in their L1. What suggestions for teaching reading and writing to very young children? In this case, your newcomers in kindergarten and first grade that are pre-literate, many of the students that they will be joining in the class are in the same boat. They too will be learning literacy skills, reading skills, and writing skills for the first time. So I suggest you fold them in just like you would your mainstream students, and they will benefit from all the strategies you use from your pre-literate native speakers. A question that came through, which is I think a very good one, is how forthcoming are families if a child has suffered trauma? And that's an excellent question, and it's one that we might not find out right away. You think of one of the participants in the Building Bridges background alluded to crossing the border and the difficulties that he faced. And many students are afraid to share these difficulties. Some of them are afraid to share, and families as well, for fear that perhaps all their papers are not in order, that they came undocumented. And so sometimes you will find hidden information that has not been forthright. And if we, as a school system, as educators, as administrators in the school, can give those families a safe place to realize that they can be forthcoming about how they got here without any fear of reprisal. Another question was asking about guidelines for grading newcomers. And that's a great question because, of course, they're not going to be able to be graded in the same way. So I have seen teachers do this in various ways. They have allowed the students, as we know, the oral skills come before the written skills, and very often teachers will allow students to answer a question orally, where they're able to express themselves. Maybe they won't be able to do it in writing, or they allow students to share what they know through a project-based curriculum or doing projects. Some teachers actually adapt their tests and assessments by giving the students many fewer questions, by maybe if it's a multiple choice test, giving them many fewer choices so that it's going to be difficult for them as it is without having 4 A, B, C, D choices, maybe just A and B. Another thing that can be done is to grade actually the content and language separately so that the students realize that they are making progress in both. The progress is documented in content by our assessments. They see that they are progressing as their test scores get better. But to also give them rubrics to show that that their language is improving as well. This is what we want. They have a dual role in our classrooms. They're learning the content, but they're also trying to learn English as well. So to give them the opportunity of seeing that they are being successful and progressing in both. It can be done through rubrics. It can be done through checklists. Simply saying, I have contributed today, and they can check it. I have spoken to a peer. They can check that. It gives them some guidance so that we can grade them in an appropriate way.
We'd like to thank Ann Hengerer for sharing her experience with us today, and each of you for taking the time to participate in this afternoon's webinar. We hope it's been helpful to you as you work to support English learners in your schools and classrooms. We'd also like to extend an invitation for you to join us for the next 2 sessions in our webinar series about supporting newcomer English learners. The second webinar will be held on June 28th at 2 to 3 p.m. and the third webinar will be held on July 12th, also at 2 to 3 p.m. And just to mention one more time, Cal will also be hosting an institute here in Washington, D.C. about supporting newcomers on August 8th and 9th. So please see the Cal website for more information about that. We'd also like to extend one final invitation to continue to connect and collaborate with us and your fellow educators on Education Connections. Feel free to reach out to our team at edconnect@cal.org with any questions you may have about the webinar or the community. Thanks again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.